When I pulled up to my mother's house that night, I already knew I shouldn't have come. My stomach was tight, my hands had gone cold on the steering wheel, and the porch light flickered like it knew better too. But it was Grandma's birthday, her first since the stroke, and she had called me herself, her voice faint but hopeful. "I'd love to see your face, darling, just for cake." So I came. For her. Not for them. Inside, the house smelled like burnt garlic bread and too many scented candles. The hall was crowded with coats that weren't mine, laughter that wasn't meant for me. I stepped in, brushing off a gust of rain from my shoulders, and was immediately greeted with a nod from Aunt Val, who used to braid my hair when I was small, and now barely looked at me. "Look who decided to show up," someone muttered, low but sharp. It came from the living room. I didn't even turn. My coat was still half on. I made my way to the dining room where the long oak table was already half full. My brother Greg sat at the head, legs wide, wine glass already half empty, with that smug tilt to his chin like he owned the room. Technically, he sort of did now. He and Mom had moved in together after Dad passed, and somehow, Greg's name was on all the mail now. His voice carried even before I got fully through the archway. "Hey!" he called out, looking straight at me. "Your plate's outside with the dogs." Laughter exploded across the table. Not all of them, not Grandma, but enough. I stopped. My throat closed. Greg smirked, leaned back like it was the goddamn throne of some frat kingdom, and lifted his glass toward me in mock toast. "You like the patio, right?" I scanned the table. No one told him to stop. My mother stared down at her salad. My younger cousin Marie covered her mouth like she was embarrassed for me. But not enough to speak. Uncle Daniel chuckled and said, "That's a bit much, son." But it was performative, the way someone scolds a dog they don't really mind barking. I was still standing, still holding my coat, still pretending this wasn't happening in real time, to my adult face. "You're disgusting," I said. It came out quiet, flat. I didn't give him the satisfaction of fury. Greg didn't flinch. "You never had much of a sense of humor. But then again, you never had much of anything, did you?" It wasn't just about a plate. It never was. I set my coat down over the back of a chair, still didn't sit. Grandma, frail, trembling, sat at the far end, her eyes wide, lips parted like she wanted to speak but had lost the words again. She blinked, reached for the small gold necklace she always wore, a habit, nervous or soothing, and I felt that old ache bloom in my chest. The table shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. Someone passed a basket of bread. The moment had stretched too long, and people wanted it to disappear, so they forced it down with butter and wine. I turned and walked out. Out the back door, through the screen, into the night air that smelled like wet grass and old rust. And yes, there was a plate on the patio table. Paper, plastic fork, a scoop of mashed potatoes, a single chicken drumstick, and peas that had already begun to wrinkle in the cold. No seat. I stood there, alone in the dark, staring at it. And for a flickering moment, I almost picked it up. But then I saw it, not the food, not the humiliation, but the quiet approval Greg had soaked in, the silence my mother offered him like a reward. So I didn't eat it, I didn't touch it. I left the plate there for the rain. I walked back to my car. My hands were shaking, but I moved slowly, deliberately. I opened the door, sat inside, and turned the engine on without saying goodbye. It wasn't the insult that made me leave. It was realizing how easy it was for them to laugh, and how long I'd let them. "My name is Rachel LeClaire. I'm 38, a litigation analyst for a mid-sized firm in Ann Arbor, and I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment above a bakery that smells like sugar and scorched dreams every morning. I like the quiet. I like that no one tells me when to come, when to smile, when to swallow things that never should have been served." That night, after I left my mother's house, I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I sat in the parking lot of the 24-hour pharmacy for 15 minutes, stared at the blue neon, and thought about getting tissues or vodka. I got neither. I just needed space before going home, not to recover, but to remember. Greg's words weren't the worst things ever said to me. They were just the most public. Growing up, I was the one who disappeared in plain sight. Our family photos always had Greg front and center, his crooked little grin praised like it was presidential. When he shoved me into the side of the pool at 9 and I cracked my chin open, Mom told me not to ruin the day with tears. When I got into the top program for state debate, she said, "Oh, but that's not the one with the sports scholarships, is it?" Greg failed math 3 semesters in a row and Dad gave him his old wristwatch. I got straight A's and was told not to gloat. At 14, I started keeping a small notebook, not a diary, just 1 line per day. It sat between my mattress and the box spring. Greg took my bike and crashed it again. He blamed me. I apologized. Mom accidentally gave him the college fund. Dad missed my scholarship dinner but took Greg to a car show. The notebook was soft green leather with a little strap. I never gave it a title. I didn't need one. I didn't realize then that I was archiving. That one day, I'd need the truth not to heal, but to defend myself. College gave me oxygen. I majored in political science, lived on campus, and started building a life where no one used my name only to diminish it. My professors saw me. My friends thought I was funny. I dated, badly at first, but slowly I became a woman who chose her silence carefully. Not because she was scared, but because she'd learned its weight. Then Grandma had a fall. I was 26, thriving at my new job, freshly promoted, and hadn't come home in almost 2 years. The call came from Aunt Val. "We need someone to stay with her while she recovers. Your brother's too busy, and your mom's just exhausted. You're the flexible one." I asked if anyone else had said yes yet. Silence. I flew back that night. For 4 months, I slept in a cot next to my grandmother's room. I fed her soup. I helped her relearn her steps, her speech, her stubborn independence. I missed a major client pitch that quarter and was told by HR that my personal time couldn't be extended further. I nearly lost my job. Greg visited twice. Both times he brought store-bought muffins and left within 10 minutes. When Grandma finally stood without a walker, she cried. She took my hand and pressed a small gold necklace into my palm, the one she'd worn for decades. A tiny locket with a blurry photo of my grandfather and the words "to be chosen is to be cherished" etched inside. "I want you to have this," she whispered. "Not because of blood, because of who showed up." That necklace became my armor. I wore it under my blouses, held it before hard calls, rubbed it when my hands itched to text things I shouldn't. My parents never asked how Grandma got better, only that it was good she had. 2 years later, when she sold her house and moved in with them, Greg was suddenly interested again. "It's better this way," Mom said. "He knows how to manage things." What she meant was, he knows how to own things. They let him handle her finances, her appointments, even her mail. When I asked to see the bills once, Greg said, "You're not on anything, Rach. Stop trying to play lawyer." I stepped back. I had to. My job needed me, my own mortgage was calling, and Grandma seemed mostly okay. I let go of proximity to keep my sanity. But I didn't forget the pattern. I didn't forget how silence was their favorite form of cruelty. Not yelling, not hitting, just cutting you out of the frame and acting like it was an accident. So when Greg humiliated me at that dinner, it wasn't just about disrespect. It was about reclaiming his role, their role, as the center of gravity. He wasn't afraid of consequences because there had never been any. But this time, something had shifted. When I got home that night, I opened the storage chest at the foot of my bed, pulled out the green notebook. I flipped through its pages, brittle now, but still inked with truth. Then I opened a newer folder, one labeled Elder Care Accounts. Inside were spreadsheets, statements, scans of checks I had helped Grandma mail years ago, copies of insurance letters with my name as the secondary contact before Greg took over, and at the bottom, a copy of the notarized memo she had drafted before her last move. In the event of serious decline, I wish Rachel LeClaire to be consulted regarding all major care decisions, as she has been my primary caretaker in recovery and has shown the utmost diligence and respect to my needs and dignity. It wasn't a will, but it was a thread, one I would later pull, slowly, calmly, and thoroughly, until the whole thing unraveled. But not yet. First, I needed to see how far they'd go, and whether they'd remember that I was watching. After the dinner incident, no one reached out. Not my mother, not Aunt Val, and certainly not Greg. The group chat where family updates once trickled in, mostly baby photos, casserole recipes, and chain prayer requests, went quiet toward me. I wasn't removed. I was just ignored, like a ghost who hadn't noticed she'd passed away. But that was fine. I didn't need a seat at their table anymore. I'd built my own. At work, I was respected. I handled sensitive arbitration cases for private healthcare groups, disputes over elder care contracts, power of attorney mishaps, financial guardianship gone wrong. I knew the law. I knew the loopholes. And more importantly, I knew how to find paper trails. It was my job to see what others didn't want found. And now, I turned that lens on my own family, not out of vengeance, but vigilance. It started with the bank. I called in a favor from an old contact at a regional credit union, purely for professional curiosity, I told myself. Grandma had moved her accounts after selling her house. She mentioned it during one of our last proper phone calls, something about Greg saying it'd be simpler. When I checked, her old account had been emptied within 6 weeks of her move into Mom's place. The funds had been consolidated, then split, half to a new joint account under Greg's name. The rest? A slow leak of debit charges, home improvement stores, online sports betting, something called Lux Gaming Bar and Lounge. Then the caregiver invoices stopped. Her last physical therapy bill had gone unpaid for 3 months. A second opinion visit I'd helped her schedule never happened. The appointment was canceled with no record of rescheduling. Meanwhile, Greg was posting vacation photos. Italy, Aspen, Napa. He had a new girlfriend, blonde and overly tanned, who captioned a yacht photo with, "Manifesting good energy, #blessed." I kept notes, quietly, carefully. I printed statements, saved PDFs, highlighted amounts. Then, 2 weeks later, Aunt Val called. "Hi, sweetheart," she said syrupy. "Listen, we're having some issues with Grandma's estate paperwork, and well, Greg mentioned you might be helpful." I leaned back in my chair. "What kind of issues?" "Oh, nothing serious," she laughed. "Just, little things. There's a clause in the original deed, something about transferable rights, and, well, Greg says you helped with some of her paperwork during the recovery period. So could you take a look?" There it was, the first crack. I agreed to meet. Not because I wanted to help, but because I wanted to watch them squirm when they realized I was no longer their cleanup girl. We met in Greg's home office, which used to be Dad's den. The leather chair was the same, but the warmth was gone. Greg wore a Henley and tried to look casual, but his knee bounced under the desk. "You've got a good memory, right?" he said without greeting. "You helped Graham set up her old will?" "She drafted it with her lawyer. I was in the room, and there wasn't anything weird in it. Weird, like favoritism. Or mistakes," I smiled. "You mean like putting me down as her healthcare proxy?" His face twitched. "I just think she might have been confused back then," he said, post-stroke and all. "She wasn't confused, she was recovering, and legally competent, evaluated and signed off." I pulled a folder from my bag and set it on his desk. "But I brought copies, in case your memory's the one that's fuzzy." He didn't open it. His face flushed. Aunt Val, who'd been hovering in the corner pretending to sort envelopes, suddenly found an excuse to leave. Greg leaned back. "What do you want, Rach? Really?" "I want you to stop pretending that I don't exist until you need something. I want you to stop spending Grandma's money like you earned it. And I want you to stop underestimating me." He scoffed, forced a laugh. "Jesus, are you going to take me to court?" I didn't respond. He stood, grabbed his water glass. "You really haven't changed, still holding on to every little thing like it's a weapon." "No," I said calmly. "Not every little thing. Just the things that matter." That night, I filed a formal inquiry into Grandma's power of attorney status. She had named Greg as her financial POA under the condition that 2 witnesses verified her consent. One of the witnesses was a woman who, as I found out, had been fired from a previous care job for coercing an elderly patient to sign blank checks. The other? His girlfriend. It was enough to trigger an independent review. Within 2 weeks, a mediator was appointed. Grandma's lawyer, who had not been consulted in her latest documents, was furious. The case was opened as a potential misuse of fiduciary power, and suddenly, everyone remembered my number again. Mom left a voicemail crying, "You're going to tear the family apart." Aunt Val sent a long email about healing and forgiveness. Greg sent nothing, but he showed up at my apartment one night. Not with fists or fury, but a smile like we were still kids, and he'd just dented my bike. "We can fix this quietly," he said, hands in his pockets. "You'll look like a bitter little sister if this goes public." I looked at him, really looked. He was softening around the jaw, still athletic but aging in places he didn't expect, still charming but hollow. Like a house full of mirrors and no foundation. "I don't need it to go public," I said. "I just need it to be accurate." He left without another word. 3 days later, I was summoned to mediation. They thought I'd come alone. I didn't. The mediation was held in a neutral office space downtown, all sterile carpet and clattering air vents. There was a conference table too large for the group, a water dispenser with off-brand cups, and a framed poster about conflict as opportunity hung crooked on the far wall. If irony had a headquarters, it would have looked like this. I wore black slacks, a slate blue blouse, and the gold necklace Grandma gave me, its locket still tucked close to my collarbone, its etching worn smooth by years of fingers brushing against it for comfort or courage. They were already seated when I arrived, Greg, Aunt Val, and my mother, who looked as if she'd been dragged there from church. Her lipstick was faint, and her hands clenched a leather purse like it might float her above the whole mess. I walked in with Hannah Cho, a colleague from my firm. She wasn't family. She wasn't sentimental, but she was sharp and unflinching, and had reviewed every document I brought, not as my lawyer, just as an observer, a silent warning. Greg's eyes narrowed the second he saw her. "What the hell is this?" "This is Hannah," I said, placing my folder gently on the table. "She'll be taking notes." "You brought a lawyer?" he snapped. "She's here in a personal capacity, but if you'd rather reschedule and go formal, I can arrange that. The mediator, a soft-spoken man named Elliot, intervened before Greg could escalate. Let's all take a breath. We're here to clarify concerns about Miss Margaret Leclerc's financial handling and future planning. Not to assign blame. This isn't litigation. Not yet. Elliot began by summarizing the issue. Grandma's funds had been rapidly depleted under Greg's power of attorney, with several questionable expenditures and a lack of transparency. Her care invoices had gone unpaid, and family members, namely me, had raised alarms. Greg leaned back, arms crossed. She gave me full access. She said she trusted me. And yet, I interjected, sliding a page across the table, she also signed this statement, drafted before your POA was filed, expressing her desire that I be consulted on all medical and financial matters. It's signed, witnessed, dated 4 months earlier. He didn't touch the paper. I continued, voice steady. Additionally, these are copies of unpaid caregiver invoices from the last 6 months. I contacted the provider directly. They confirmed that the contract lapsed after they weren't reimbursed for 3 consecutive billing cycles. Grandma stopped getting PT after February. She didn't need it anymore, Greg muttered. She fell in March, I said. Did anyone mention that to her doctor? Or was it just easier to cancel the visits once the money started going elsewhere? Greg looked to our mother, who remained silent. I flipped another page. Here's a record of cash transfers from Grandma's primary savings account into your personal checking. Also noted, several thousand spent at a luxury gaming lounge, international transactions from Napa and Florence. She gave me permission, Greg said too loud. She said she wanted me to enjoy life while I could. She's not some prisoner. Did she say that before or after she was prescribed risperidone? I asked, because I pulled the prescription date. It came after her second cognitive assessment flagged early-stage dementia. Greg's face turned from red to gray. Aunt Val shifted uncomfortably. Rachel, maybe we should take a break. No, I said, we're not done. I turned to Elliot. I'm requesting a freeze on all financial activity involving Margaret Leclerc until an independent evaluator can confirm her current mental state. I also have 3 written statements from neighbors and a former caregiver expressing concern about Greg's access and behavior. Elliot nodded slowly. This is substantial. Greg stood, chair scraping. This is a damn ambush. It's accountability, Hannah said, her first words all morning. You're just jealous, he spat. You always have been. Dad liked me better, Mom trusted me more. Grandma saw me as the one who stuck around. You stuck around because you wanted control, I said, standing now too. You treated her like a wallet, not a woman. And when anyone questioned it, you hid behind our family's silence. But I won't be silent anymore. He looked at Mom again, as if waiting for her to rescue him. She didn't. Instead, she said, voice barely above a whisper, Rachel, are you sure about all of this? I'm sure, I said, steady, and I'm done asking to be believed. The session ended with the mediator agreeing to file for a temporary guardianship review. Greg would be barred from making any further transactions until the review concluded. Outside the room, Greg followed me into the hallway. You think you won? He hissed. You're alone, Rachel. You always will be. I looked at him. Really looked. His jaw was clenched, his skin blotchy. The confident mask was slipping, and underneath it was a boy who'd grown into a man without ever being told no. I'd rather be alone, I said, than owned. I walked out with Hannah beside me, the locket warm against my skin, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was leaving anything behind. The guardianship review concluded 3 weeks later. Quietly, cleanly. The court assigned temporary oversight to a third-party fiduciary, a firm with no blood ties and no tolerance for blurred lines. Greg's power of attorney was suspended, pending further investigation, and his access to Grandma's finances was officially cut off. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post anything online or send any cryptic texts. I simply forwarded the result to Aunt Val and my mother with a single sentence, "This is for Grandma." No one replied, but they saw it, and they felt it. I visited Grandma the following Sunday. The house was quieter than I remembered. Greg had moved out, apparently after a heated argument with Mom that ended with him threatening to never speak to this family again. He hadn't returned her calls since. Grandma was sitting in the sunroom, her small frame wrapped in a soft beige sweater, a mug of tea trembling in her hands. When she saw me, her face crinkled with that old, warm confusion, like she remembered something before she could place it. I kneeled beside her, took her hand. "Hi, Gram." She looked at me for a long moment, then blinked. "Rachel?" I nodded. "I brought you something." From my coat pocket, I pulled the necklace. I had taken it off before the review, wanting it safe. I had worn it through every decision, every confrontation. But now, I needed her to have it again. She reached out slowly, her fingers thinner than I remembered, more delicate. She took the locket, held it to her chest, and whispered, "Still warm." "I kept it close," I said. We sat together for a while, saying little, just watching the branches outside dance in the wind. Later that evening, Mom knocked softly on my bedroom door, the one I had once slept in as a teenager, the one with floral wallpaper that had peeled near the corners from summers of heat and indifference. She came in slowly, holding a small box. "I found this in the attic," she said, placing it on the nightstand. "It's your old music box. You used to fall asleep to it." I didn't know what to say, so I nodded. She sat down across from me, not quite meeting my eyes. I didn't know everything. About Greg. About the money. I should have paid more attention. I let the silence stretch. I wanted to see what she'd do with it. "I think," she continued, haltingly, "I wanted him to be okay so badly that I let myself believe he was, even when he wasn't." She looked up. Her eyes were red. "You've always been the strong one. You never asked for anything. You handled everything on your own. I thought you didn't need me." "I needed a mother," I said, "not just someone to call when things broke." She flinched, nodded. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The next morning, Aunt Val stopped by. She brought blueberry scones and a tight hug that smelled like regret. "You were right," she said into my shoulder. "We should have seen it sooner. We just didn't want to lose both of you." "You didn't lose me," I said. "You just never tried to keep me." That night, after Grandma went to bed, I sat alone in the living room with a glass of water and the necklace in my hand. I wasn't sure if I'd leave it with her permanently or just let her borrow it a while, but in that moment I understood it wasn't just a keepsake. It was a symbol of who showed up, of who stayed when it was hard, of who was willing to fight without shouting. Later, as I packed to head back to my apartment, my mother came into the hallway again. She held an envelope. "We're updating the family trust," she said. "The lawyer said we should include everyone moving forward, equally." I took it without a word. She hesitated. Would you consider coming over for dinner next weekend?" It wasn't a perfect offering. It was late, but it was something. "I'll think about it," I said, and I meant it, because I finally had the choice. Back in my apartment, the city was as it always had been, messy, loud, indifferent, but for once, that didn't feel like a bad thing. No one expected anything from me here except the truth. Rent was due, deadlines loomed, coffee brewed, life moved forward. I placed the music box on my shelf, next to the green notebook, now worn at the spine. I hadn't opened it since the review. I didn't need to. Its job was done. Some nights, I still thought about that plate on the patio. Cold peas, one drumstick, paper fork. It wasn't the food that stung. It was the message. You are not one of us. But now I understand something they never did. I was never meant to beg for a seat at their table. I was meant to build my own. I touch the necklace sometimes when I forget that. I don't wear it every day anymore. But when I do, it's not for armor. It's for memory. For grace. For every version of myself that stood quiet in rooms that tried to erase her. She's not gone. She's just walking forward. And from here, the air feels different. Not cleaner, not perfect, just mine.